All right. Well, good morning. I now call to order the meeting of the Bond Financing Committee members of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development, for Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. This meeting is being webcasted. The committee members have received all the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. We always welcome public comment and public participation at our meetings. I will note for the record that the public was given an opportunity to comment on the agenda item by submitting written comments, and we have not received any written comments by noon yesterday. I will also note that we do not have any members of the public here with us today. I will ask the committee members if anybody has any potential conflict of interest with respect to today's agenda to please make the appropriate disclosure. Hearing none, I'll recognize we have a quorum for the committee meeting, and I will now ask Matthew Bray, ESD's treasurer, to present today's agenda item, which relates to the issuance of state personal income tax revenue bonds and/or state sales tax revenue bonds. Matt?
Thank you. Good morning. Today, the committee is being asked to approve the proposed sale and delivery of one or more series or subseries of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, referred to as the corporation, state personal income tax revenue bonds, or the bonds. In connection with approving the bonds, the committee is also asked to approve the forms of multiple documents as well as the parameters of the sale terms. The bonds may be issued as tax exempt and/or as federally taxable bonds on one or more dates in aggregate principal amount not to exceed $2.6 billion. As stated in the resolutions, the committee, on behalf of the corporation, is being asked to delegate authority to certain corporation officers and employees to establish, within certain parameters, the final terms of the bond sale, including the aggregate principal amount, and to take all actions deemed necessary to accomplish the final sale and delivery of the bonds. The bonds will be issued by the corporation pursuant to the Revenue Bond Financing Program and will be secured by a pledge of financing agreement payments that are payable from amounts legally required to be deposited into the Revenue Bond Tax Fund by New York State or the state. The Revenue Bond Tax Fund receives a statutory allocation of 50% of state personal income tax receipts, 50% of the receipts from the New York State Employer Compensation Expense Program, and 50% of pass-through entity tax receipts. Distributions of such funds are subject to annual appropriations by the state legislature. The corporation currently plans to issue the bonds under the New York State Urban Development Corporation State Personal Income Revenue Bonds General Purpose General Bond Resolution adopted on November 16th, 2009, as supplemented, and the Supplemental Resolution 2022-1 authorizing state personal income tax revenue bonds general purpose, which will be referred to as the PIT Supplemental Resolution. In order to provide maximum flexibility, it is proposed that the Bond Financing Committee also approve Supplemental Resolution 2022-1 authorizing state sales tax revenue bonds, together with the PIT Supplemental Resolution to be referred to as the Supplemental Resolutions. In the event that the corporation issues any sales tax bonds, such bonds will be issued pursuant to the Sales Tax Revenue Bond Financing Program and will be secured by a pledge of financing agreement payments from amounts legally required to be deposited into the Sales Tax Revenue Bond Tax Fund. The Bond Financing Committee previously approved master continuing disclosure agreements that will apply to the bonds, the appointment of co-bond counsel, and the submission of an application to the Public Authorities Control Board, or PACB, for the authorization to fund the projects or programs for which the bonds will be issued. On September 14th, the PACB approved the application and authorized state personal income tax revenue bonds and/or state sales tax revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $2.6 billion. Proceeds from the bonds will be used to finance projects relating to state facilities, economic development activities, and certain other state-supported activities, and may refund certain outstanding state-supported debt previously issued by the corporation and other authorized issuers of state-supported debt. The bonds will be sold on a competitive and/or negotiated basis as fixed-rate, tax-exempt, and fixed-rate taxable bonds. The bonds are expected to be offered pursuant to one or more preliminary official statements and sold pursuant to separate notices of sale. In accordance with the resolution and exhibits, the committee is requested to adopt the supplemental resolutions, approve the form of the supplemental schedules, authorize the sale of bonds on a public, competitive, and/or negotiated basis, approve the form and content of the preliminary official statements and various documents connected with the sale and delivery of the bonds, and authorize certain officers and employees of the corporation to take all actions deemed necessary to accomplish the final sale and delivery of the bonds and refund certain outstanding state-supported debt previously issued by the corporation and other authorized issuers of state-supported debt, including the payment of any amounts necessary to terminate or reinstate any interest rate hedge agreements related to the bonds being refunded. By approving the Bond Financing Committee resolution, the committee will establish $2.6 billion as the maximum aggregate par amount of bonds that may be issued, establish a maximum true interest cost of 7.5% for the tax-exempt bonds and 10% for the taxable bonds, and delegate to certain officers and employees the power to determine the terms of the bonds within the parameters set forth therein, including but not limited to the final aggregate principal amount of the bonds, the principal amount of each series of the bonds, the principal amount of the bonds maturing in each year, the final maturity dates for such bonds, and the interest rates of the bonds, and to make such changes to the related documents deemed necessary and appropriate. The bonds are expected to price at the end of September and close in October. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. I have a question for either you or Ray. Just curious, the Federal Reserve has been on this interest rate hike process for a while, and they're supposed to do it again this week. And I know that impacts car loans and mortgage rates, but does it also have a corresponding uptick in the municipal bond market as well? And do we anticipate does the state need to anticipate paying higher interest rates based on what the Fed actions are?
The increase in Fed rates we have seen the municipal bond rates increase as the Fed has increased rates. So there is a correlation between the actions. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
And the maximum rates that we're authorizing today are 7.5 on the tax exempt side and 10 in the taxable side. And I think it's really good we go now, because in a year from now, if the way things are going, it'll just keep galloping along unless something changes. So
Exactly.
good to get in and get out now.
So we should get them in under that 7.5.
Don't you think?
Yeah,
exactly. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, the numbers we've seen, the average interest cost should be around 4%, low 4%.
Which is historically low, but double what it was a year ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was free money almost before.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, for a decade.
Yes, a lot of people forget the history. Still historically low.
Yep.
So very
100%.
good. Are there any other questions for Matthew or Ray? If not, I will move the motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor on the motion? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Is there any other business that anybody needs to raise? We need to act on? Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Staff, thank you very much for your professionalism, and we'll see you again sometime soon, I'm sure. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.